The night before my surgery, I lay in the hospital bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The room smelled like antiseptic and something faintly floral, probably the small pot of lavender the ward volunteer had left on the windowsill. Outside, I could hear the hum of the elevator down the hall, the soft squeak of rubber soles on linoleum. It was just past 10 o'clock. Visiting hours had ended an hour ago. My son, Colin, had not come. I kept telling myself there was a reasonable explanation. Traffic on the 401 can be impossible on a Wednesday evening. His wife, Serena, probably needed help with the kids. There was always something. Colin was a busy man. He worked in commercial real estate, always on a call, always closing something. I understood that. I had always understood that. But lying there alone with a consent form on the bedside table and an IV already taped to my left hand, understanding felt less like grace and more like something I had simply gotten too tired to fight. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 of those years as a school librarian in Kitchener, Ontario. I raised Colin on my own, after his father, Gerald. My Gerald died of a sudden heart attack when Colin was 9. I worked double shifts at Christmas so we could afford hockey skates. I drove him to practice at 5:30 in the morning without complaint, every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 years. When he got into the business program at Wilfrid Laurier, I cried in the parking lot of the Tim Hortons on King Street because I was so proud. I didn't know what else to do with it. I am not telling you this to make myself sound like a saint. I made mistakes. I was too hard on him sometimes, and too soft at others. But I loved my son completely, the way you love something you built out of your own grief and hope and stubbornness. And I never once thought there would come a day when I would be alone the night before surgery, wondering if he had forgotten to check his phone. The surgery was a hip replacement. Routine, my doctor had said. Dr. Vasquez had smiled when he said it, the confident smile of a man who has done this procedure 400 times. But routine is a word that means something different when you are the one being put under. When you are 67, and you have a heart that already runs a little slow, and you are alone in a room in Grand River Hospital, with a consent form you signed yourself, because there was no one else to sign with you. I had called Colin 3 days earlier to tell him the date had been confirmed. "Mom, that's great," he said. "The sooner you get it fixed, the better." "I was hoping you might be able to come by the evening before," I said. "Just to, be there." There was a pause, not a long one, but I have known Colin's pauses for 58 years, and I know the difference between the ones that mean he is thinking and the ones that mean he is already calculating how to say no. "Serena's got her work thing that night," he said. "I'd have to take the kids. It's not really a great time, Mom." "I understand," I said, and I did understand. I just also understood something else. Something I had been understanding quietly in small doses for the past several years, that the space I occupied in Colin's life had been shrinking. Not dramatically, not cruelly, just steadily. The way water recedes from a shoreline, so gradually you don't notice until you look back and realize the beach has doubled in size. His wife, Serena Alderton, is not a bad person. I want to be clear about that. She is organized and competent and she makes very good risotto. But she is also a woman who has always been faintly uncomfortable with the closeness Colin and I used to have. And over the years, without any single dramatic confrontation, that discomfort had become the weather we all lived in. Holidays were shorter. Calls were less frequent. My grandson, Jamie, who is 7 now, had stopped asking to sleep over at my house sometime around his 5th birthday. And I had never been told why. I lay there in that hospital bed, and I thought about all of this in the particular way you think about things at 10 o'clock at night when you are afraid and there is no one there to distract you from it. Then the door opened. "Mrs. Harlow? Still awake?" "Her name tag," said Brenda Kowalski, RN. She was perhaps 35, with dark hair pulled back, and an unhurried way of moving that I had noticed earlier in the evening when she came to check my vitals. She was carrying a small cup of water and a warm blanket folded over her arm. "Thought you might be cold," she said. "The thermostat in this wing runs low after 9. "That's very kind of you," I said. She draped the blanket over my legs and set the water on the table within reach, and then she did something that surprised me. Instead of leaving immediately the way the other nurses had, she paused and looked at me with a kind of steady, unhurried attention. "Is there someone coming in the morning?" she asked. Not in a clinical way, in the way a person asks when they already suspect the answer. "My son was hoping to," I said. She nodded slowly. She didn't push. She just said, "I'll be on shift until 7. If you need anything tonight, you call." She left, and I lay there in the warm blanket she had brought me, and I felt, for the first time all evening, slightly less like I was disappearing. Colin did not come in the morning. He sent a text at 6:48 a.m. that said, "Good luck today, Mom. You've got this. Call me when you're out." I read it 3 times. I kept waiting for the next message, the one that said I'm in the parking lot or I'm on my way. It didn't come. Brenda was the one who walked beside my gurney to the OR doors. She squeezed my hand before they took me through, a brief, firm squeeze that said, "I see you more clearly than most words could have." And then the doors swung open, and the lights above me were very bright, and Dr. Vasquez was saying something reassuring from behind his mask. And then there was nothing. I woke up in recovery to the sound of a monitor beeping, and the particular ache of a body that has been through something. My mouth was dry. My hip felt distant and strange, like a piece of furniture someone had moved to the wrong room. Brenda was there. She had come back. Her shift had ended. She told me later, but she had stayed an extra 40 minutes to make sure I came out all right. She helped me drink water through a straw. She told me the surgery had gone smoothly. She told me my color was good. "Did anyone call?" I asked. "Your son sent a message to the nursing station," she said. "He asked us to let him know when you were out of recovery." "That's nice," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Just looked. Then she went and got me another warm blanket. Colin visited on the 3rd day. He came in the afternoon, when Jamie was at school and Serena was presumably at work, and he brought me a box of shortbread from the Scottish bakery on King Street that I have always liked. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been feeling guilty for 3 days and had decided that shortbread was a reasonable apology. "You look good, Mom," he said. "I look like someone rearranged my skeleton," I said. "But thank you." He laughed, and for a moment it was like it used to be. He sat in the chair beside my bed, and we talked out about Jamie's hockey, and about the new development he was working on north of the city, and I let myself enjoy it because it was better than the alternative. He did not mention the morning of the surgery. Neither did I. He stayed for 45 minutes. He kissed my forehead when he left. At the door he turned and said, "Serena says she hopes you feel better." "Tell her thank you," I said. He left, and I watched the door close behind him, and I thought, this is what we have become. Not enemies. Just strangers who share a history. People who speak to each other in the shorthand of old affection without the substance underneath. Brenda came by on her rounds that evening and asked how I was feeling. "I had a visitor today," I said. "That's good," she said, checking my chart. "He brought shortbread." She looked up from the chart and smiled. "Well, that's something." "It is," I agreed. "It's something." I was in the hospital for 6 days. In those 6 days, Colin visited once. My daughter-in-law, Serena Alderton, did not visit at all, though she did send a text message with a flower emoji. My neighbor back home in Kitchener, a retired teacher named Wren. She's actually in the file of names I'm not supposed to use, never mind. My neighbor sent a card that arrived on day 4, which I read 3 times. Brenda was there every day she worked. She was not always my assigned nurse. The ward rotates, and some days I had a young man named Marcus, who was perfectly competent and very efficient. But on Brenda's shifts, she always found a moment. She brought me a book from the hospital's lending cart on day 2. A mystery set in Nova Scotia that I ended up finishing in 2 days. On day 4, when the physiotherapy had been harder than expected, and I was sitting in the chair by the window feeling more discouraged than I wanted to admit, she pulled up a stool and sat with me for 10 minutes during her break, and talked to me about nothing important. About a hiking trail she had done near Owen Sound. About her mother's recipe for perogies. And somehow that was exactly what I needed. I have thought a lot, since then, about what it means to be truly present with someone. It is not a complicated thing. It is just the willingness to stop, and stay, and not be somewhere else in your head. Brenda Kowalski had that quality in a way that I think most people lose by the time they are adults, or maybe never have in the first place. On my last day, when I was waiting for the discharge paperwork, she came to say goodbye. She shook my hand and said she hoped my recovery went smoothly. And then, because she was a practical woman with a practical heart, she also said, "Make sure someone is checking on you at home. Don't try to manage stairs alone for the first 2 weeks." "I'll be fine," I said. She gave me a look that was equal parts warmth and skepticism. "Mrs. Harlow," she said, "I have no doubt you are capable of managing. I just hope you don't have to manage alone." I went home alone. My son arranged for a home care aide to come twice a week. He organized it efficiently, over the phone, in between his other calls, and I was grateful for that, genuinely grateful. But the house felt very large those first evenings, and I lay in my bed on the ground floor, where the home care company had suggested I sleep temporarily, and I listened to the quiet, and I thought about what Brenda had said. "I hope you don't have to manage alone." The will had existed since Gerald died. I had updated it twice, once when Colin graduated university, once when Jamie was born. In both versions, the arrangement was simple. The house in Kitchener, the savings, the small portfolio of investments Gerald had left behind. All of it was to go to Colin, with a provision that a portion be set aside in trust for Jamie until he turned 21. I want to be clear that I did not change it out of anger. I have thought about this carefully, and I want to be honest about it, because I think the difference matters. Anger is quick. Anger wants to punish. What I felt in the weeks after I came home from this hospital was not anger, or not only anger. It was something slower and more sober. It was the particular clarity that comes when you are lying in a hospital bed alone, and you are forced, for the first time in years, to see your life exactly as it is, rather than as you have been telling yourself it is. I saw that my son loved me, in the way people love things they have taken for granted so long, they have stopped noticing them. I saw that my daughter-in-law, Serena Alderton, had built a life with my son in which I was a peripheral figure, visiting twice a year, calling on birthdays, receiving flower emojis in moments of crisis. And I saw, and this was the hardest part to see, that I had allowed this to happen, that for years I had been making excuses, and saying I understand, and shrinking myself into whatever space was offered to me, because I did not want to be the difficult mother-in-law, did not want to cause trouble, did not want to lose what little I still had. I had spent 31 years teaching children that the stories we tell matter, that the way we narrate our own lives shapes what we believe is possible. And here I was, 67 years old, narrating myself into irrelevance. It took me about a month to make my decision, and several more weeks to make an appointment with my lawyer. Gwendolyn Marsh has been my lawyer for 18 years. She is a careful, deliberate woman who speaks slowly and listens well, and when I sat across from her desk and told her what I wanted to do, she listened without interrupting until I was finished. "This is a significant change," she said. "I know." "Have you spoken to Colin about your intentions?" "No," I said, "and I'm not going to." She looked at me over her reading glasses. "I'm not here to advise you on family matters," she said, "but I want to make sure you've thought it through." "I have thought about almost nothing else for 2 months," I said. She nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "Tell me what you want." What I wanted was this. I wanted to leave the house and the majority of my estate not to Colin, but to Brenda Kowalski. I wanted to establish a trust, a proper one, ironclad, with a trustee who was not Colin and not Serena. For Jamie, my grandson, not a small amount, a meaningful one, enough to matter when he turned 21, enough to give him options. I want to be clear about this. I was never angry at Jamie. Jamie is 7 years old, and he had nothing to do with any of this. He will have that money when the time comes, and his parents will have no access to it, and that is how I intend it. And the rest, the house, the savings, the investments, I wanted to leave to Brenda. Gwendolyn Marsh asked me, with her careful lawyer's precision, whether I had a personal relationship with the nurse beyond the hospital stay. "No," I said. "That's not what this is." "What is it then?" I thought about it for a moment. "It's a statement," I said, "about what I value, about what I think deserves to be rewarded in the world." Brenda Kowalski stayed with me when she didn't have to. She saw me when it would have been easier not to. I want to acknowledge that in the most concrete way I know how. Gwendolyn took off her reading glasses and set them on the desk. "There's also a provision I'd like to include," I said, "about what I'd like the money eventually to be used for." I did not tell Colin about the will. I told him, over the phone in early March, that I had been thinking about things since the surgery. About getting older, about what I needed, about the kind of relationship I wanted to have with him going forward. I told him that I loved him, because I do, and I told him that I felt, over the past few years, that I had become less and less present in his life, and that I was not willing to continue pretending that was all right. He was quiet for a long time. "Mom," he said finally, "I know I wasn't there for the surgery. I know that wasn't right." "No," I said. "It wasn't. Things have been complicated with Serena and..." I said as gently as I could. "I'm not asking you to explain. I'm telling you what I need going forward. I need you to show up. Not perfectly, not every time. But I need to know that I matter to you in a way that is real, not just in theory." Another silence. "You matter to me," he said. His voice had gone quiet in the way it goes quiet when he is trying not to show that something has landed. "Then show me," I said. We talked for another 20 minutes. We did not resolve everything. I do not think these things resolve in a single phone call, and I was not expecting them to. But something shifted. I could feel it, the way you can feel a door opening in the next room. He called the following Sunday, not for any reason. Just to talk. He told me about a disagreement he'd been having with a contractor, something he would never have bothered me with before. I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea, and I listened, and I thought, this is what it was supposed to be all along. I reached out to Brenda Kowalski through the hospital. I was not sure she would respond. Nurses are busy people, and I was one patient among hundreds, and I suspected she had long since moved on from our brief connection, in the way that medical professionals necessarily must. But she wrote back within a week. A genuine, warm message that said she remembered me clearly and hoped my recovery had gone well. We had coffee at a place near the hospital, a small cafe on Herb Street that I used to go to with Gerald on Saturday mornings a long time ago. Brenda arrived in her own clothes, jeans, a green jacket, and without the context of the hospital she looked both younger and more ordinary than I remembered, which is to say she looked like a real person rather than a symbol, and that was exactly right. I did not tell her about the will that day. I told her that I had wanted to thank her properly, and that her kindness during my stay had meant more to me than she knew. She was slightly embarrassed by this in the way that genuinely good people often are when their goodness is named directly. "I was just doing my job," she said. "You were doing quite a lot more than your job," I said, "and I think you know that." She looked at her coffee cup. "You seemed like someone who needed a bit of extra," she said. "That's all." We talked for an hour and a half. I learned that she had grown up in Sudbury, that she had trained at McMaster, that she had been a nurse for 11 years. I learned that she had a mother in a long-term care facility in Waterloo, which perhaps explained her particular attentiveness to older patients. I learned that she had thought, on and off, about starting a support network for elderly patients who had no family nearby. People who fell through the gap between formal care and genuine human connection. "There are a lot of them," she said. "More than people think." "I know," I said. When Gwendolyn Marsh completed the new will, I signed it on a Thursday afternoon in her office on King Street with her paralegal, and a retired judge she sometimes uses as a witness. It was a very quiet moment for something that felt so significant. The pen scratched across the paper. Gwendolyn asked if I was certain. I said yes. The provision I had asked her to include was this: that if Brenda chose to use some portion of the inheritance to establish the support network she had described, a community care initiative for elderly patients without adequate family support in the Waterloo region, the estate would actively encourage that purpose. It was not a legal obligation. It was an expression of values. What I believe the money should do in the world if it gets the chance. I named it in the will. I called it the Harlow Initiative. Gerald would have liked that, I think. He was always more sentimental than he let on. I have not told Colin. I have thought carefully about whether I should, and my conclusion is that this is not information he needs right now. What he needs right now is the chance to choose differently, to rebuild what we had, without the knowledge of the will hanging over everything, transforming every phone call and every visit into something calculated. I do not want him to show up out of guilt or fear. I want him to show up because he has remembered who we are to each other. He is trying, I see it. 3 weeks ago he came to Kitchener on a Saturday, Just him, without Serena or Jamie. We drove out to the conservation area off Westmount Road and walked the trail along the creek, slowly because my hips still bothers me in the cold, and he shortened his stride without me asking. We talked about Gerald. We talked about the years when it was just the two of us and hockey practice at 5:30 in the morning, and how he used to fall asleep in the car on the way home. He cried a little, briefly, and pretended he hadn't. I will not claim we have solved everything. I will not tell you that this story has a tidy ending, because it doesn't. My life is still happening, and Colin's life is still happening. And I do not know yet where all the threads lead. He may change. He may not change enough. Serena is still Serena, and I have made my peace with the fact that she and I will never be close, and that is all right. What I can tell you is this: the will is signed. Jamie's trust is secure, and Brenda Kowalski, who stayed late on a morning in November to hold the hand of a woman she had only just met, will one day have the means to do something in the world that she has been quietly dreaming of doing for years. I think about what she said to me on the day I was discharged. I hope you don't have to manage alone. She says it about the stairs, about the first 2 weeks of recovery. But I have been turning the sentence over in my mind ever since, because it feels like it means something larger. I managed alone for a long time. I got very good at it. And somewhere along the way, I confused being capable of managing alone with being all right with it. I am not all right with it. I am 67 years old, and I am not all right with it. And that is a sentence I could not have said 2 years ago. I would have said fine. I would have said I understand. I would have smiled and meant it, the way you mean things when you have practiced them long enough. There is a woman in this city who stayed when she could have left. There is a grandson who will have choices when he is 21 that I could not have imagined at that age. And there is a son who called me last Sunday for no reason, who is trying, who shortened his stride on a cold trail without being asked. I signed a piece of paper on a Thursday afternoon in an office on King Street, and it was a very quiet moment. But I have learned to pay attention to quiet moments. They are the ones that turn out to matter most.